To this day.
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 What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt Deville with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Deontay, the Bronze Bomber Wilder. Get this. Deontay Wilder names his toughest opponent, and it's not Zeileh Zhang or Tyson Fury. Deontay Wilder surprised fans when asked who was his toughest opponent, and he said that it was Luis King Kong Ortiz. He said one of the best Cuban southpaws, people were ducking him. No one scared me like Ortiz. And those are the words of Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder. And let me counterpunch. Well, first of all, we have to see. I'll explain this two different ways. One, if this is true, I think what supports what Wilder is saying is this and that, should I say, that was the first time Wilder was tested, you know what I mean? He was tested against a guy that was 39 years of age, that turned 40 on paper that same month. Because I think Luis Ortiz's birthday is like later in March, and I think they fought like March 3rd or 4th, right, of 2018. That being said, that was the first time we seen him in there with somebody that had a pulse, in there with an undefeated, well, I can't say an undefeated fighter because he's been in there with undefeated fighters. We just didn't know who they were. We know who Luis Ortiz was. We know that this guy was undefeated. We know about, his abilities, all that. And we've seen Wilder struggle. We've seen Wilder hurt. We've seen Wilder take a bunch of punches. We've seen him get outboxed. We've seen him in other fights. But this fight presented a lot of different elements to it. So I can understand Wilder. Hey, that was my toughest opponent, because not only was he able to hurt me, he was also able to outpunch me, outpoint me, and outbox me. Now, if this, the other way I would explain this is, because there is always an angle, and you look for the angle in a lot of times, and a lot of people would say, hey, Wilder, you think this was your toughest opponent because this is the only guy between the other two guys that you claimed that weren't tough fights you defeated. So a lot of people could say that this is an ego trip for Deontay Wilder just based on the way that he talks at times or how he views himself. I was told from a friend of mine that Libras have an inflated sense of themselves. So, you know what I mean? That may be the case with Deontay. He may look at Zeileh Zhang, Tyson Fury, or even Joseph Parker not as impressive because he lost to him. You know what I mean? Not giving them the credit that they possibly deserve. And I will give you an example. Speaking of Joseph Parker, he claimed Joseph Parker, it was a boring fight. There was nothing spectacular about that fight. You know what I mean? It's almost like the equivalent of someone like Erislandy Lara outboxing someone and they said he's just boring and he's a runner. You know what I mean? But he still whooped your ass though, didn't he? So, you know what I mean? I think that's in that same ballpark when you're dealing with people that don't really want to give credit where credit is due. Okay, and then that may be the thing about Wilder. But I do agree with Wilder, though. I think that was a tough fight for him. I don't necessarily know if it's the toughest, but this is based on what Wilder has claimed, that Luis Ortiz is the toughest. And to add to that, in closing, I think Luis Ortiz was a very tough opponent. And I feel now, looking back at all the stuff that happened between Al Heyman and Jim Jimenez, Luis Ortiz's manager, and Eddie Hearn, a guy that once promoted Luis Ortiz in these fights that mysteriously just didn't happen. You know, I would have to say he was avoided. And I think there was a very good reason why he was avoided, you know, because Luis Ortiz was not a typical Cuban fighter. He was a southpaw, like a lot of southpaws, but he was he had a mean demeanor. This dude wanted to rip your head off. He was 6'4", you know what I mean? He was a big guy. He was solid. He had great counterpunching ability. His IQ was off the chain, but he was not afraid of exchanges. You know, he did not play the cat and mouse game like a lot of Cubans got labeled for. He was a guy that he loved to counter, but he also liked to mix it up too. I learned that in the Bryant Jennings fight, you know, when Bryant Jennings tried to go, you know, full on Philly, fight with sticks, stones, and bottles in the streets, in the alleyways of Philly, and tried to take it to Luis Ortiz. And he found out that Luis Ortiz took it back to him, King Kong style. So I do understand Wilder, or why would Wilder, if he is honestly stating the facts or his own opinion, that Luis Ortiz is tough, because he is. But you guys tell me what you think of Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder stating that Luis King Kong Ortiz was his toughest opponent in his professional career. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.